Hello and welcome into the RotoWire Esports Show. My name is Andrew Laird, joined as always by Ethan Sexton. This time to talk about Friday's 4-game LPL LCK slate and maybe Friday's 5-game LEC slate. You're just going to have to stick around to find out. Ethan, somebody mentioned it in our Discord this morning that we mentioned on the podcast or on the video yesterday that Damwon probably doesn't score enough points to win you a GPP, and here we nailed it.
Yeah, what a joke, though, man. Oh, my God. Nobody in their right mind would have predicted, a 2-0 for or 2-0 loss for Damwon today. And, I mean, we've seen, we talk about it every day, how crazy the slates have been, but that was by far the craziest thing that's happened so far this year. I mean, that was totally unexpected for the worst LCK team to be arguably the best LCK team. And to sweep them in one-sided fashion in both games, just ridiculous. So it was good. I didn't play Damwon because their salaries, but I definitely didn't expect them to lose.
Yeah. Genji came up huge for us. I woke up this morning tied for first in everything that I entered, not realizing that RNG hadn't even begun, or they hadn't. Basically, RNG ended up knocking me out.
Right.
But I was like, I still, the Damwon's there too. They're going to push me back. And then I saw Fred at Brion win the first game, and I'm like, that helps. It's possible that Damwon just crushes them in the next two, but I have a chance. I did not finish first, just for those wondering. But I was saying to somebody earlier that there was I forget what the combination was. It was obviously RNG and I'm already blanking, even though the slate was this morning. WE.
Yep, so the first place in the Shock Blast, which is the 10K to first, the combination was RNG, WE.
Right.
The Fred at Brion team one-off, which obviously smashed. So two people had that. One of them was Awesemo, who, when I say that he mass enters, I don't mean that he's only good because he can mass enter. He's obviously an incredible player in every DFS sport.
Yeah.
So no knock on him there, but it's very bold to land on that. I mean, they were 3,800, which is I think the cheapest we've seen a team for sure this year. So I get it if you want to, it allowed you to stack two big favorites, but obviously that's why they did it. I don't think anyone really expected Damwon to get 2-0'd, but so that was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, the one I didn't even enter that one. The one I entered, I think, was a one-off with their top laner.
Yep. Yeah.
Which, again, it was a lineup I never would have built.
Right. Me either, man.
I just, if you're gonna do a one-off, I guess with the expectation that the other ones, if you're gonna play RNG and WE, then you take the one-off from the favorite you're not playing. But bravo to whoever came up with that lineup because.
Yep.
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But let's jump into Friday's 4-game slate. It's a little tighter than what we saw this morning. We got Rare Adam coming off their big win earlier this week as the biggest favorite, but nothing too crazy. They're around minus 225 against BLG. And then JDG is favored in the other LPL match against EDG. And then we've got Hanwha Life favored against KT Rolster, and then DRX favored against your boys from Sandbox. But everything's kind of close, so I feel like you're not going to be able to stack the two big favorites, but you may not have wanted to anyway. So where are we looking on this slate?
I honestly looking at this slate. I kind of like all of the underdogs more than the favorites, which
That's
is
fun.
A weird thing to say. The only favorite I feel should win is HLE, and even with them, I'm not overly confident because we've talked about it for different slates that they've been on, and really they're the only player that you really feel great about is Chovy.
Yeah.
And he's going up against KT's arguably, probably not arguably, I'd say outright best player in UCal, the player that they're building around. So that sort of negates that whole Chovy's obviously awesome, but he's going up against a good mid laner as well. So even HLE, I think I'm leaning that they win that series, but don't feel that great about them. And then the other series, I just like all the underdogs, and it may sound kind of weird, the Rare Adam one especially, because Rare Adam, as you alluded to, coming off a big sweep earlier in the week. But the weird thing about what they're doing tomorrow is they brought in Lay-in to start in the jungle over Aches, and I think Lay-in is just kind of washed, term we like to use sometimes, right? He looked really bad for the most part on IG last year. He had his moments, but that went hand in hand with how the team was performing, I guess, too. They peaks and valleys, like we always talk about with them. But I think Aches is a pretty good player, and it seems weird to bring in Lay-in after sweeping earlier in the week, although I do believe I think he was suspended for a few games, so maybe it was always their intent for him to be the starter once he was off suspension, so maybe they don't care about coming off a sweep earlier this week with Aches. They're going to bring in Lay-in because that's what they wanted to do. I like this BLG roster still. The biggest question mark I think in that series is, can Zika stand up to Fofo? I think Fofo is BLG's best player probably, and
Rare Adams.
That's like the one Rare Adams' best player. Sorry, Fofo is. That's like the one spot where they have a fairly decent advantage, I would say. I really like, but for the hard part is like iBoy and aiming, kind of a wash. I would lean aiming, honestly. I like aiming there. So the bottom lanes are kind of even. The jungle's pretty even. I like Meteor, and then top lane Bu and Cube are just like they're there. Neither one's really going to take over the game necessarily. So kind of leaning BLG a little bit on that one. Even though Rare Adam are coming off a really big win earlier in the week, and I don't know, it's hard to call, but I think both sides are in play there in that series.
Do you think BLG would have been favored if this was before the Rare Adam? Could they beat Suning? Like if this was before it, do you think that BLG is actually favored?
Probably. Well,
I just wonder how much we're overreacting to one game.
The tough part is with that, like Rare Adam had only played one series before they beat Suning, so we really didn't have a ton of information on them. And then BLG are 1-2 coming in, so hard to say, but probably not. They might have leaned Rare Adam, giving them the benefit of the doubt, and then after they beat Suning, it makes a ton of sense that Rare Adam are the favorites, but they're the most, in a lot of the roles, I think they're the most expensive team, and I don't feel that comfortable about using them, to be honest, even though, I don't know, do I like BLG better? It's hard to say. I mean, that's kind of like a 50-50 matchup, but obviously if you end up using BLG, you get a lot of salary savings, although you might not need them because in the next two series, I mean, DRX, I think, deserve to be favored because they've gotten off to a better start this season, but Sandbox obviously looked really good the other day, and maybe they're coming into their own. I still like their lineup. I think Summit and Fate especially are really good players. So I like them as underdogs. And then in the final LPL matchup, which is the marquee matchup on the series, I mean, EDG have just been outright better so far this season than JDG, so it's a little surprising to see them as underdogs. And not only underdogs, but JDG are the second highest favorites or highest priced team on the slate, and in some roles they're the highest priced. With Kanavi, and I don't think that they're that safe to use either. I mean, that's a little bit of last year's bias coming in, I think, but I think objectively EDG have been the much better team so far to start this season. So it was a little surprising, maybe not that JDG are favorites, but that they're such large favorites over EDG.
Yeah, Kanavi's the only one who keeps the Rare Adam guy from being the most expensive at each position.
Yep.
It does seem like that one's like a little flipped. Do you think that this HLE KT matchup is like mostly avoided? Like it just doesn't seem like I don't know. It seems like that doesn't fit in enough. That like we've seen Sandbox kind of crush a little bit, and then the LPL matches are always pretty popular. But does that leave HLE and KT as kind of overlooked?
I think so. It could be like that. To me personally, it just feels like the least exciting of the three series. So maybe like coming at it with that kind of bias or whatever you want to say, maybe Maybe it's just me who thinks that one will go under-owned, but I mean that definitely looks like the least exciting series on the day. And then you've got two teams that, Hanwha Life is fourth in kills in the LCK, and then KT have the lowest amount of kills in the league so far. So maybe that's a lower kill game tomorrow. Sandbox and DRX, I think, could be really explosive.
Yeah.
I did say I like Sandbox, but I think DRX deserve to be favored, and I'm kind of leaning DRX because I think the jungle gap is still pretty large with Piosik. And then their three rookies in the mid ADC and support roles have looked really good, and Kingan's been fine as well. So I kind of lean DRX there, and then those two teams have been two of the more explosive teams. I think they're third and fourth amongst kills, and HLE, who I think I said were fourth, are actually fifth.
Yeah.
Fifth highest as a team in kills. So that DRX Sandbox one seems like it should be way more explosive than KT HLE. So I feel like that KT HLE is maybe like the one people kind of overlook. But we saw it the other day, for the series we said, I think it was DRX Africa maybe. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we said that one, or whichever one it was, would be overlooked, and then the team that ended up winning that was DRX for sure, I think, because they ended up winning, and they were in the winning lineup. So it's hard to tell people to completely just ignore any series on any slate, honestly. But to me, that's the one that gets the most overlooked, I would think.
Yeah, looking back at the box score that we have, DRX, 2-1 Africa, Piosik, series high 11 kills.
Yep. Okay. And yeah, he's obviously a great player, so I'm leaning DRX there, but I like Sandbox, and if you're looking for an underdog, you could definitely do worse than Sandbox.
Right. Yeah, it does. I feel like an underdog. Like, I think you can get away with two underdogs tomorrow.
I think so too. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's like the 10K winner. The big GPP winners tomorrow is double dog. Just because I think all of the dogs are live. Like,
yeah.
I would fault anyone for playing them. And some of them are teams that I think could show up and smash with a lot of kills. Especially like looking into it and thinking a little more about it. That DRX Sandbox series kind of seems like the one you're going to want to hit on, depending on which side you want to play, because I think that might end up being the most explosive on the entire slate, including the LPL games, which seems weird to say because we're used to the LPL having these crazy high kill total games, but EDG and JDG, neither one have been that explosive, and then historically, neither one really is like the insane push the pace teams like some of the other teams we're used to in the LPL, and the same could be said about Rare Atom and BLG. So maybe that DRX Sandbox is the most explosive series on the slate, and maybe it goes a little overlooked because people could potentially still be thinking along the lines of obviously the LPL is where you want to start because they're going to get the more kills.
Yeah, it's funny. It seems like the right game to like anchor one other team. Like if we had a big favorite, like if BLG were huge favorites, you could just build a BLG DRX and a BLG Sandbox and just all done. But like we don't really have that dominant favorite that
right.
You think we should have that? Yeah, I almost feel like you want to see. This is where you're like, oh, maybe I should just make 100 lineups instead of 5.
If you got the bankroll, go for it.
Yeah, they're all. I think generally you can take either side of the 3 later games and just skip that first KT HLE, just because it just doesn't seem like there are enough fantasy points. But like, you wouldn't be surprised if any of the other 3 were the highest scoring of the slate.
No, not at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if either team in those 3 series won. You know what I mean? So it makes it a little tricky tomorrow, but
for sure,
it's good. Like we say too, though, it's good in that sense because it's going to hopefully make for more lineup builds, and there won't be as many duplicates and things like that. So
yeah, you almost don't need to get as weird because
right.
There are just so many different ways you can go.
Right.
All right, that's fair. Anything else before we jump to Europe?
No, I don't think so. I think we kind of hit on everything a little bit at least, and at least gave people some things to think on.
All right, cool. So for full disclosure, I played some LEC last season, and I find it just pure shenanigans.
Yes.
The best of one is wild in itself,
Yep.
and it just felt like all of the teams were. It just felt like the volatility was extremely high. Adding to that it's a 6-game slate. Is 6 or 5? 6-game
5.
slate. 5?
Yep, 5. There's only 10 teams in the league.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, just didn't count.
Well, it's confusing because LCS for their preseason tournament, which LCS is the same format in the regular season. They play 5 games. There's 10 teams. But for this preseason tournament, there was 6 games. So 1 or 2 teams were playing twice on the.
Okay,
even
maybe
though
that's
those games weren't included on the DraftKings slate, but that probably what threw you off.
All right. So we have a few like big favorites, but nobody's like that big. I guess G2 is probably always going to be up there. Yep. But for playing these best of one slates, like, do you just go all in on the volatility, or do people tend to still just try to jam in as many favorites as possible?
I think so. The best of one format obviously makes, taking shots on underdogs way more like enticing, because upsets are going to happen way more in best of one. I mean, we've seen upsets in these best of 3 series happen a lot already this
That's
season
true.
too. But in the best of one is just way more like hand in hand for upsets, because you only have to win 1 game. You don't have to win 2 to win the entire series. So it makes upsets a lot easier to come by, in my opinion. And the volatility just way more, because you only have to win 1 game instead of 2 to win the series. That said, so there's a lot of different ways people can go, but I still think you're going to see the standard teams in a lot of lineups. So like G2 is always going to be the most expensive team on any given slate, no matter who they're playing. Like, they're playing what's probably the second or third best team in Mad Lions, depending on how you feel about Mad Lions and Fnatic. So they have a really tough matchup tomorrow. They're still the most expensive team in every single role on the slate.
Right.
And we're going to see that pretty much anytime. Anytime you're playing Europe, G2 are going to be the most expensive team. And it's always for good reason, because when they win, they're pretty much always the team that's going to get to 20 kills. So it makes sense for them to always be the most expensive team, no matter who they're playing, because even if they're playing another really good team, they can still come out and smash for 20-plus kills on any given day. So they're always going to be expensive, and they're always going to be popular. So what you have to decide a lot of times what you have to decide when you're playing LEC is, do I want to start my lineup with G2, or do I want to be different and start my lineup with the team G2 are playing? So obviously on some of these slates, it's going to be a way more viable thing to go against G2 than others. And tomorrow is one of those slates, with Mad Lions being one of the other teams that should be in title contention. You can take a shot on Mad Lions and not feel like you're doing something completely stupid. It's always hard to pick against G2 though.
Sure.
So I wouldn't feel great about playing Mad Lions, but I can at least understand it and don't think it's like a stupid thing to do tomorrow.
Well, it does usually make you feel better taking an underdog when they're like legitimately good.
Right, of course. So yeah, tomorrow it's going to.
This isn't Fred at Breon here.
Right. So obviously, yeah, exactly. Obviously playing Mad Lions, you're not going to feel that bad about, because they're another one of the best teams in the league.
Right.
But that series might be, or that game, they're not playing a series, is probably the key one to get on the right side of tomorrow, because Mad Lions are a team that can show up with 20 kills as well. So, you got that. And of course it's the first game of the day. So if you you play that game and then you pick the wrong side, your lineups are dead.
But at least we know.
Is that a game stack spot? Potentially. I'm not gonna do a game stack, but would it surprise me if that's like a 25 to 20 kill game? No, it wouldn't. So a game stack could be in order for that one as well. So that's the key game for tomorrow. It's crazy. I personally wouldn't recommend fading either side, just because I think whoever wins has the highest upside on the slate. So I would play one of the sides at least, and kind of go from there with your lineups. Are
there more game stacks in LEC and LCS because of the best of one?
There shouldn't be. I mean, I don't think that there is. I don't think that's the way people really go because it doesn't make any sense to game stack. Like I'm just talking about it specifically for this game because these are two high upside teams that'll fight a lot. But like if we look at a different game like Fnatic Misfits or Fnatic are huge favorites, like it would make no sense whatsoever to game stack that because if Fnatic win, they're going to win probably one-sidedly, and Misfits aren't going to be worth a damn thing. So game stacks in the best of one really don't make sense at all because at least in best of three, if you do a game stack, you're hoping that the team that loses is still going to win one game at least and put up scores high enough. So game stacks to me really don't make a ton of sense to do with any regularity on these best of ones. So I wouldn't really be looking at them at all.
Okay, that's fair. You said before we started recording that you liked some underdogs, so hit me.
I don't want to give it away. I want to keep it for myself. No, just kidding. So the one underdog that I really like is XL tomorrow. I think people are going to be pretty hype on Rogue because they made Worlds and all that stuff. They're bringing in Odoamne in the top lane, who's an upgrade on Finn for sure. But I think kind of everything just clicked right for that team. I think they should still be pretty good, like top half of the table team this year. But I'm a sucker for this XL team, full disclosure, so I played them all the time last year and mostly to my demise, but it's just my opinion, but I like the upside of this XL team. Does it show up on day one? I don't know, but, Cry's in the top lane is a guy who played a lot of carries last year, so he's, a guy you can play in the top lane that can take over a game. They have Patrick and Torre, who I think are one of the best bot lanes in the league. And I really like Patrick especially, I think is one of the best AD carries. Like if he slotted into a G2 or a Fnatic, I think people would be kind of drooling over this guy because it's just the fact that he's not on a team that is as good as those two teams. He's on a team that finishes like middle of the table, just outside of playoffs last year. So I think people know that he's good, but they don't talk about him in the same light as some of the other AD carries who are on better teams. So I think he's a legitimate carry option on any given slate. Really like him as a player. And then they brought in this guy, and I'm going to completely butcher his name. Chekalad, I think. Chekalad
is what I would say.
In the mid lane. And from all accounts, he was an absolute stud in EU Masters, which is the kind of academy setup, second tier in Europe.
Yep.
So he's an up-and-coming player in the mid lane. So I really like this team's upside. The biggest question is, does it show up tomorrow on day one against a team that was pretty good last year and qualified for Worlds? But I like them as an underdog in that matchup for sure.
That's fun. Yeah, I guess we should emphasize that it's the opening day.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Not a lot is known yet.
Right. Yeah, that's a fun one because I think Rogue are the second biggest. Oh no, I guess they're behind Fnatic also, but
yeah, and it depends on the roles too. They're third in some places, and they're I think they're fourth in some others or things of that. So it kind of depends on which role you're looking at. But yeah, they're up there. They're up there in price. They're not as high as G2 across the board, of course, but
right.
Rogue are one of the more expensive options tomorrow.
We have all the stats on RotoWire, but in order to save me the time, are there teams that generally I should avoid from the LEC that even if they're favored, like they just don't play enough to, or play well enough to pay off?
It's hard. It's hard to say because the best of ones even make kill totals volatile a lot of the time. True. Some games are slow, some games are fast, so it's hard to say. But if we look at some of these favorites tomorrow, I'm not that hyped up about an SK. And I'm not that hyped up about Fnatic, but it's mostly because I think the winner of G2 Mad outscores them.
Okay.
Fnatic should certainly win that game against Misfits, so I can't fault anybody for wanting to go there, but I'm not too... I just feel like whoever wins G2 Mad outscores Fnatic, most likely. And then SK are favored against Astralis, but I'm not that excited about this SK team, so... those are arguably the two worst teams in the league, potentially. So is that going to be a crazy game? It could be. But it's just hard. It's really hard to say because there's so much volatility with the best of one stuff. It's hard to predict with any real confidence, honestly.
Yeah, the best of one is like the whole concept is wild to me. That
it's annoying and it gets frustrating to play because I don't know. It's just anything can happen really,
right.
And you play the biggest favorite and they just come out and get rolled or whatever and frustrates you. But it is what it is. It's just got to embrace the volatility, I guess, and not get too angry about it.
So what's the lineup situation?
None of them are confirmed. I mean, some of the teams you can follow them on Twitter, and some of them might confirm beforehand, but they don't do it like China does, where they'll announce the day before or anything like that. So looking, I mean, if we go down kind of the list, G2 should be set as it was last year, but they brought in Reckless, so Reckless is going to start. But the other four are as it was. Same with Fnatic. They brought in. So they still have Whippo, Selfmade, and Hillisang that'll start, and then they brought in Niski from Cloud9 and Upset as their new AD carry. I'm not going to go down every team just because that's going to get tedious here. I don't think there's any, we have the expected lineups on RotoWire, and I base those expected lineups based on things that I've either read or heard. So I listen to some podcasts, and I'll read some things I listen to the Riot official podcast. And sometimes they'll talk about who they expect to start or who's been starting scrims or things of that nature. So I factor all that into account. But if we're wrong, we're wrong. But it's not from lack of trying, I guess is how I'd put it. And it's just it's annoying that I wish they'd implement, and I don't know how they'd do it, but I wish they'd implement that all the teams had to announce their starters before the slates. But DraftKings, I don't think, has the same kind of pull with esports as they do with traditional sports. And same, DraftKings are sports bettors, DFS, whatever. So I think for baseball, it was a big push last year because of sports betting to get the lineups out earlier. But I don't think they have the same kind of pull with esports yet. So
surely not. Yeah,
it makes it difficult. But the expected lineups, that's what I'm expecting to see tomorrow. And there's only really a couple spots that could be different anyway. So. It's not I don't think it's too big of a worry, but it's always a little bit of a concern, of course.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the other issue is that the slate is, it takes place over 5 hours, and so
right,
right, and they're all, there are no simultaneous starts. So even if we
got
each one an hour ahead of time, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, you're right about that because I think I said on one of the pods I wish they'd had late swap. But then I thought about it afterward. The problem with late swap is the series don't start at a set time.
Right.
So you can't really do late swap because, they could have late swap, but the series already started or whatever. So, yeah, I get why they don't do that actually now in hindsight.
Yeah. Oh, well. All right. That's all we got. If you guys enjoyed this, if you could just please hit the like button below. If you're looking for more RotoWire videos, you can subscribe and get everything for every sport that we cover, or just hit up the esports playlist that we have. Is simple enough if that's all you're looking for. So Ethan, thank you for that, and good luck tomorrow.
Yep, good luck to everybody out there.